Here are some of the most chilling and tragic deaths in the history of hiking, where adventure turned to horror. From famous stories of lost explorers to dangerous selfie mishaps, these accounts will leave you speechless. Join us as we delve in and try to uncover the dark side of nature's beauty. It was the morning of September 27, 2014, and Izumi Noguchi, a 59-year-old man from Japan, was hiking Mount Ontake. What was supposed to be a peaceful morning of walking and reconnecting with nature turned into a tragedy of massive proportions. Izumi never made it off the mountain alive. At 59 years old, Izumi was a construction company employee. An avid hiker, he enjoyed taking walks in the middle of nature, often accompanied by his wife, Hiromi. That morning, though, Hiromi had to work and was unable to join Izumi on the hike. However, Izumi had a plan so that his wife could still enjoy the views of the mountain. He decided to bring his camera along on the hike and take as many pictures as he could. The morning was more than beautiful. It was perfect for hiking. The weather was balmy, the sky was clear, and the autumn leaves had just begun to turn. Since the weather was so good and it was a Saturday, Izumi was far from being the only person hiking Mount Ontake that day. Mount Ontake, standing over 10,000 feet tall, is a popular tourist destination, especially because its slopes are gentle and its trails are accessible. The mountain attracts seasoned hikers and novices alike. But Mount Ontake is no ordinary mountain. It is, in fact, an active volcano, the second highest in Japan. Izumi Noguchi took multiple pictures as he hiked, hoping to show them to his wife. When he reached Mount Ontake, the 59-year-old posed for a picture. The picture shows a smiling Izumi posing next to a sign stating the mountain's altitude. Izumi looks proud of his accomplishment. But things quickly took a dark turn. It was 11:52 a.m., just a short while after Izumi reached the summit, when the unimaginable happened. The serene beauty of the morning was shattered in a flash as a violent explosion shook the ground. Mount Ontake, which is a volcano, erupted. The eruption spewed ash, rocks, and scorching hot gases into the sky, creating a monstrous plume that could be seen for miles. It was a breathtaking sight, as unique as it was terrifying. Izumi grabbed his camera and began to document the disaster. He took a few photos showing the enormous plume of ash and smoke as it billowed from the crater, darkening the sky and engulfing the mountain. The next photos captured the cloud of ash and gases growing larger and advancing. A final image shows the ash cloud almost upon Izumi Noguchi. The cloud looks solid, as if it is a wall of gray obscuring the landscape. The danger seems imminent. Izumi wasn't the only individual who decided to take pictures of the disaster, nor was he the only one to be killed in the violent eruption. It remains unknown whether he believed there would be enough time to outrun the calamity. What is known, however, is that the eruption unleashed rocks and debris at speeds of up to 190 miles per hour. Some of those rocks struck Izumi Noguchi, killing him. Most of the victims succumbed to injuries caused by the flying rocks. Izumi's body was found near the summit's shrine compound. Many of the deceased bore the marks of the disaster, with numerous fractures and lacerations, particularly on the head and back. Many of them died running. Izumi's camera was found next to his body. The camera was dented, but the microchip was intact. As such, his haunting pictures could be recovered. Izumi's wife Hiromi later made the images public as a tribute to her husband's memory. Hiromi said she wished Izumi had fled instead of taking pictures. "I'd rather have him back," she added. There were hundreds of hikers on the mountain that day. 63 of them, including Izumi Noguchi, died in what was the deadliest volcanic disaster in Japan since World War II. Despite increased seismic activity detected prior to the eruption, Japanese authorities said there were no significant earthquakes to signal the impending disaster. In December 2018, Louisa Vesterager Jespersen and Maren Juland, two friends studying at the University of Southeastern Norway, were on a trip in Morocco. But their journey, meant to be an adventure, turned into a nightmare that sparked global outrage when Louisa and Maren were targeted by terrorists. Louisa Vesterager Jespersen, a 24-year-old Danish woman, and Maren Juland, a 28-year-old Norwegian woman, arrived in Morocco on December 9, 2018, eager to explore the country's majestic landscapes. They first visited Marrakesh before setting out for the village of Imlil, a popular base for tourists wanting to trek to Mount Toubkal, North Africa's highest peak. Louisa and Maren, who were also flatmates, were passionate about outdoor recreation and nature. In fact, the two young women were studying to become tour guides. As such, they were no strangers to adventures. They were well prepared for their journey and had taken precautions. But nothing and no one could have predicted what happened to them. Unbeknownst to Louisa and Maren, as they enjoyed their vacation, 4 men had decided to show their allegiance to the Islamic State, known as ISIS, with heinous acts. These men had pledged their loyalty to the terror group in a video shared on social media prior to the attack, denouncing the enemies of Allah and vowing destruction. Their leader was 25-year-old Abdesamad Ejud, a street vendor and an underground imam. Ejud, along with 27-year-old Yunus Ouaziad and 33-year-old Rachida Fati, had agreed to carry out a terrorist act on either security services or foreign tourists. After deciding to attack foreign tourists, they traveled to Imlil to look for possible targets. A 4th man, Abderrahim Kayali, initially part of the group, decided to leave before the terrorist attack would take place, but not before instructing the other 3 on how to use encrypted messaging services and to use weapons. Abdesamad Ejud, Yunus Ouaziad, and Rachida Fati watched Louisa and Maren for 4 days before deciding to strike, choosing them specifically because they were unaccompanied by guides. They attacked the women in their camp. Ejud and Ouaziad carried out the attacks, while Afati filmed on his phone. The video shows the attackers chanting jihadist slogans as they killed Louisa and Maren. Using the slogans "Enemies of Allah" and "Revenge for our brothers in Hajin," the attackers furthered their radical goals. On the morning of December 17, 2018, 2 French hikers stumbled upon a gruesome scene. They found Louisa and Maren's decapitated bodies. Their bodies were mutilated, a chilling contrast to the peaceful surroundings. The 2 French hikers alerted the authorities, and an investigation began swiftly. In the meantime, the horrifying video of the murders was shared widely, amplifying the terror. The footage was verified as authentic by Moroccan and Norwegian authorities, and its circulation added to the already present fear and outrage. 18 individuals were arrested in connection with the murders. The primary suspects, including Ejud, Ouaziad, and Afati, were apprehended in Marrakesh while on a bus, still in possession of the murder weapons. The investigation revealed their deep-rooted connections to ISIS, with Ejud having previously been imprisoned for attempting to join the group in Syria. The 3 men were charged with the murders, while several others faced various terrorism-related charges. Many around the world believed that only the death penalty could provide justice for the victims and bring some peace to their families. The victims' families, particularly Louisa's mother, expressed their profound grief and the irreparable void left by the murders. She, too, called for the death penalty. In July 2019, Ejud, Ouaziad, and Afati were sentenced to death, despite the fact that executions have not been carried out in Morocco since 1993. Their actions, filmed in chilling detail, left no room for doubt about their guilt. Abderrahim Kayali, the 4th member of the group, was initially sentenced to life in prison, but his sentence was elevated to the death penalty. Kayali took his own life in prison, awaiting execution. The aftermath of the murders saw vigils and memorials in Morocco and the victims' home countries. In Denmark and Norway, the funerals were attended by high-ranking officials and loved ones who paid their respects to Louisa and Maren. On August 9, 2019, Simon Gauthier, a 27-year-old French art history student studying in Italy, set out to explore the untamed beauty of the coastline near Belvedere di Ciolandrea in the municipality of San Giovanni a Piero, Italy. It was supposed to be a leisurely hike, but fate had other plans. That Friday, Simon was heading from Policastro Busentino towards Naples, eager to explore the natural beauty that had captured his imagination. At that point, he had lived in Italy for 2 years. Simon lived in Rome, where he worked on his thesis. This trek was supposed to be an escape. Before embarking on his hike, the 27-year-old sent his family a photo of his backpack, perhaps a sign of his excitement and readiness for what was to come. However, what was supposed to be a day of discovery turned into a tragedy. At some point during his hike, while navigating treacherous terrain, luck left Simon. The young man fell down a cliff, breaking both of his legs in the process. The pain was excruciating, something he'd never experienced before. But Simon was alive and conscious. He knew he had to call for help. Despite the pain and panic he must have felt, Simon Gauthier managed to call emergency services. He told them he was in the middle of nowhere on the coast and that he could see the sea, but he didn't know where he was. He added he was dying of pain. Sadly, Simon's words were prophetic. Not even an hour later, he was dead due to severe blood loss. Simon probably spent his last moments on Earth in pain and afraid, waiting to be rescued. But unbeknownst to him, the authorities were facing a few issues. The rugged area where Simon fell made it nearly impossible to pinpoint his exact location. Italian emergency services, hampered by the lack of geolocation technology for emergency calls, a system proposed as early as 2009 but never implemented, struggled to organize an effective search. The delay was critical. According to some sources, it took 28 hours for the rescue teams to commence their search. Simon's friends and family, who had, in the meantime, traveled from France to aid in the rescue efforts, were devastated and disappointed by the perceived delays and inefficiencies. As days passed, over 100 rescuers, including firefighters, alpine rescuers, and a helicopter team, were deployed to scour the perilous terrain and cliffs. But there was no sign of Simon, and of course, nobody knew he was long gone. The search was complicated and tricky. It involved teams scanning the area with drones, binoculars, and even employing bloodhounds to follow any potential lead. On August 19, 2019, after 10 agonizing days, a rescuer spotted Simon Gauthier's backpack through binoculars. Soon after, the rescuers found spots of blood near the backpack, leading them to his lifeless body at the bottom of a ravine. His remains were finally retrieved, but the discovery brought little solace to those who had clung to hope for a different outcome. A preliminary investigation revealed that Simon had likely succumbed to his injuries within 40 to 45 minutes of his fall, having severed an artery in his leg and bled to death. This added another layer to the tragedy, but also a strange kind of solace, since Simon didn't actually suffer for days, the way his friends and family had feared. In the aftermath, Simon's parents considered launching an inquest into the circumstances surrounding his death, questioning the efficiency of the rescue operation. The president of the Italian 118 emergency response system highlighted the glaring inadequacies in Italy's emergency services, emphasizing that Simon could have been swiftly geolocated and possibly saved if the 2009 EU directive on the geolocation of emergency calls had been implemented. In April 1992, a 24-year-old American named Christopher McCandless hitchhiked from South Dakota to Fairbanks, Alaska. From there, he left society, choosing the wilderness of Alaska as a place to test his life philosophy and to live as honestly as possible. Christopher McCandless never emerged from the Alaskan wilderness, but he became one of the most famous American adventurers, whose story still serves both as a warning and inspiration to those who want to lose themselves in the wild. After graduating from Emory University in Georgia in 1990, Christopher sold all of his belongings, donated all of his money, and embarked on a journey across North America, ultimately hitchhiking to Alaska in April 1992. He wanted to escape the constraints of civilization and society and live off the land, inspired by the works of his literary heroes like Jack London and Henry David Thoreau. Once he arrived in Alaska, an electrician named Jim Gallion gave Christopher a ride from Fairbanks to the start of the Stampede Trail. It was obvious to Jim that the young man was severely underprepared for the journey he wanted to undertake. But Christopher was undeterred and refused all offers of help. When he entered the Alaskan wilderness, Christopher McCandless, who sometimes called himself Alexander Supertramp, had only minimal supplies. He had a bag of rice, a rifle, his precious books, and some basic camping equipment. Christopher hiked until he reached an abandoned bus on the eastern bank of the Susquehanna River, known as Fairbanks Bus 142. Christopher was overjoyed at his discovery and decided the bus would be his shelter, a refuge in the wilderness. Here, the 24-year-old documented his adventure in his diary. But soon enough, the entries became darker in tone. Christopher struggled with hunger and illness, as his attempts to live off the land turned out to be much more difficult than he had anticipated. Spring turned into summer, and Christopher spent his time foraging for edible plants and hunting small game, details we know from his meticulous diary entries. At some point, he managed to illegally hunt a moose, but the meat spoiled before he could preserve it. Christopher despaired over his decision to kill the animal, which he regretted deeply. In the meantime, he grew gradually weaker. He was isolated, constantly hungry and cold. And yet, he pressed on. In July 1992, though, after more than 2 months in the bus, Christopher decided to return to civilization. He knew he was in danger. However, the once passable Teklenica River had transformed into a raging torrent, swollen by the summer runoff from the Cantwell Glacier. There was an abandoned cable car that could have carried him across the river close to Chris's location, but he didn't have a detailed map of the area. Tragically, he returned to the bus. From then on, his situation grew increasingly dire. Chris could barely even write in his diary. On August 12th, he wrote, "Beautiful blueberries, a simple observation." It would be his last one, the end of his recorded thoughts. Sometime near the end, Christopher took a photograph of himself. The photograph shows an emaciated Christopher smiling and waving goodbye while holding a note that read, "I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye and may God bless all." It was September 6, 1992, when a group of hunters found the bus. Inside, they found what looked like a small lump inside a sleeping bag, Christopher McCandless's decomposing remains. At the time of his death, Chris weighed only 67 pounds. His body bore the signs of starvation. Authorities later confirmed that he had likely died about 2 weeks before his body was discovered. It was eventually discovered that he had ingested toxic seeds from wild potato plants, which played a factor in his death. McCandless's death sparked a complex legacy. He is now regarded as both a tragic hero and a cautionary tale. His story, immortalized in Jon Krakauer's book Into the Wild and the subsequent film adaptation, resonated with those who admired his quest for authenticity and was condemned by others who saw his journey as recklessly naive. The abandoned bus, dubbed the Magic Bus, eventually had to be removed since it had become a pilgrimage site for Christopher's admirers. Some of these admirers had to be rescued from the wilderness, while others died attempting to reach the bus. It was July 21, 2021. Sophia Chung, a social media influencer from Hong Kong, was on a day trip to Ha Pak Lai, a scenic nature park near the famed Pineapple Mountain. Sophia and her friends wanted to explore the park and maybe take some pictures for her Instagram account, on which she had tens of thousands of followers. But the woman never got the chance to post the pictures from this particular trip. At 32 years old, Sophia was known on social media for her daring stunts and breathtaking shots. She had a real passion for nature photography and would often amaze her followers with her risky photos. That July morning, Sophia and her friends arrived at Ha Pak Lai around 11 a.m., ready to explore and capture the stunning scenery. Ha Pak Lai is a popular park located near the city of Hong Kong. With its lush landscapes and rugged trails, the park offers a tranquil escape. One of the park's notable features is the Tsingdai Stream, which cascades into a waterfall, creating a stunning yet dangerous spot for photography. Sophia, who was known for her fearless approach to photography, ventured to the edge of the waterfall to snap the perfect shot. Sophia's Instagram, filled with stunning photos of her hiking, kayaking, and exploring, painted a picture of a life lived on the edge. Her bio read, "Life should be fun, not dumb." As she posed for a selfie on the edge of the waterfall, Sophia's footing slipped, and she plummeted 16 feet into the pool below. Her horrified friends immediately notified emergency services, who rushed to the scene and pulled her from the water. She was rushed to the hospital, but despite everyone's swift efforts, Sophia Chung was pronounced dead at Pamela Yude Nethersole Eastern Hospital at 7:59 p.m. News of Sophia's death traveled fast, but while her admirers mourned her, others believed Sophia was fully responsible for her death. In recent years, there has been a disturbing rise in fatalities linked to selfie taking, with people often pushing the limits of safety to capture extraordinary images. From nauseating cliff edges to towering heights, the pursuit of social media popularity has driven individuals to take unnecessary risks, sometimes with fatal consequences.